Welcome to True Crime Case Files. In this episode, we examine a case where love, secrets, and identity collide with a violent end. A newlywed husband discovers that his wife is trans, an event that spirals into a grisly murder, leaving lives shattered in its wake. Join us as we unravel the details of this tragic story and explore the dangerous impact of hidden truths. Ava Collins, 29, was a beloved librarian at Morphew Elementary School in San Diego. Known for her warm personality and creative approach to her work of exposing kids to LGBT literature. Her passion wasn't just about books but about ensuring every student saw themselves reflected in the stories they read. Eva, who was transgender, born Allen, had faced her own journey of self-discovery years before, but had chosen to keep that part of her past private, even from her new husband Jason. She hoped that what mattered most was the person she was in the present. A caring woman who loved her job, her students, and above all, her husband. Eva met Jason Collins, a 32-year-old Marine stationed at Camp Pendleton, in the fall of 2012. They were introduced by mutual friends at a local charity event for veterans in San Diego's Gaslamp Quarter. Jason, known for his calm and steady personality, was drawn to Eva's outgoing charm. They'd bonded over shared values like helping others, and their relationship quickly blossomed. By early 2014, they were married in a small, intimate ceremony attended by friends and family. Eva felt her life was finally coming together. She had her dream job and a supportive husband by her side, but she still carried the burden of her secret. Although Eva believed in the strength of her love with Jason, she worried about how he would react to learning she was transgender. In the conservative military community where Jason worked, Eva knew that acceptance wasn't always guaranteed. Jason's traditional, deeply Christian, family values sometimes came up in their conversations, reminding Eva that disclosing her past as a man could bring everything crashing down. To keep her secret safe, she avoided bringing up anything about her life before they met. If Jason asked about her childhood, Eva skillfully redirected the conversation or gave brief answers, focusing instead on their plans and dreams for the future. She even hid her job from Jason, simply telling him she worked with books. Eva's struggle with hiding her gender identity weighed heavily on her. While she told a few close friends, including her best friend and ex-lover Laura Martinez, about her journey, keeping the truth from Jason felt different. In private moments, Eva often wondered if her love for Jason could survive the weight of her male past. As much as she loved him, she feared losing him. The secrecy took an emotional toll, and some nights, after a long day at work, she found herself wondering if she would ever truly be free of fear. In March 2014, just weeks before her death, Eva was at her happiest, and also her most vulnerable. She had finally settled into married life, surrounded by people who knew and respected her. She hoped that one day, she could tell Jason her truth and that he would love her all the same. But deep down, she knew she was taking a risk every day she kept her past hidden. A risk that would end in her murder. On the morning of March 25, 2014, just after sunrise, Jason Collins made a shocking discovery. He returned to the small apartment he shared with his wife Eva on 5th Avenue in San Diego's trendy Hillcrest neighborhood. The scene he walked into would be burned into his memory forever. Eva's naked, lifeless body lay sprawled across their bed. She showed signs of strangulation, and there were clear marks of a struggle in the room. Sheets torn, a bedside lamp knocked over, and Eva's favorite novel, The Tropic of Cancer, was tossed on the floor. Jason was stunned, unable to process what he was seeing. Stumbling back in shock, Jason dialed 911, his voice frantic as he described the horrifying scene. First responders arrived at the apartment within minutes, thanks to its central location in the busy neighborhood. Police officers and paramedics entered the apartment, immediately noticing the signs of violence and carefully securing the area to preserve evidence. The initial reaction from the officers on the scene suggested they had rarely encountered such a brutal attack in this quiet residential area. Neighbors reported hearing nothing unusual the night before, describing the couple as quiet and respectful. One neighbor mentioned that the couple kept to themselves, often seen together at local spots like Balboa Park or North Park's Thorn Street Brewery on weekends. But none of these details could explain the brutal tragedy now facing investigators. As the police began gathering evidence, the quiet street filled with a mix of shock and confusion. as residents tried to grasp what had happened just a few doors down. Police arrived at the scene swiftly, with veteran officer Mark Evans leading the investigation. A seasoned investigator with a strong record, Evans was known for his methodical approach. As he entered the apartment, he carefully examined each corner, noting signs of a violent struggle. The disheveled bedspread, torn lamp cord, and scattered belongings all pointed to a confrontation that had turned deadly. Bloodstains on the bedsheets were faint but present, suggesting Eva had fought back. The bruising around her neck confirmed strangulation as the likely cause of death, but there was more that puzzled investigators. As Evans and his team examined Eva's body more closely, they noticed unusual scars near her chest and lower abdomen. These scars appeared both around her breasts and genital area, and their symmetrical placement led detectives to briefly wonder if they might have stumbled onto a ritual killing. It was rare, but in some high-profile cases, these kinds of marks could indicate ritualistic acts or symbolic wounds. At that point, officers were cautious, taking extra photos and documentation of the marks for further examination. Detective Sandra Lee, a beautiful and sexy forensic specialist called to the scene, pointed out the clean and well-healed nature of the scars. She found it strange. The scars didn't resemble injuries from the attack. Evans agreed, making a mental note to dig deeper into Eva's medical history once they gathered the rest of the forensic evidence. With no immediate answers, officers continued to treat the scene as a potential ritualistic or targeted killing, securing the perimeter and ensuring all evidence was collected carefully. As they processed the scene, investigators interviewed Jason Collins in the building's lobby. His shock was evident, and he answered questions with a flat, distant tone. Jason reported no unusual incidents the night before, adding that he and Eva had a quiet evening at home. Police took his statement but remained wary, noting his somewhat detached demeanor. Later that day, when they obtained Eva's medical records, the mystery behind the scars was finally solved. The scars were surgical, dating back years before her marriage to Jason. They learned Eva was a transgender woman, assigned male at birth, and had undergone gender-affirming surgery. This revelation shifted the investigation entirely. What had first appeared as a potential ritualistic crime scene now pointed to something far more personal and complex, with Eva's identity at the center of the tragedy. Jason Collins, Eva's 32-year-old husband, became the primary suspect almost immediately. A Marine stationed at Camp Pendleton, Jason was known for his calm demeanor and methodical, disciplined way of life. He'd met Eva 2 years before at a fundraising event for veterans near the trendy Hillcrest neighborhood, where they shared casual conversations over coffee and pastries. The two had contrasting interests but were drawn to each other's differences. Jason's conservative outlook often clashed with Eva's liberal ideals, yet they bonded over mutual respect, or so it seemed. As detectives began their questioning, Jason described his wife as passionate and outgoing, particularly about her work as an elementary school librarian. He mentioned that Eva had a strong drive to introduce LGBT literature, including sexually explicit ones, to the students, something she was known for at her school. Her efforts to expose young people to diverse stories were often praised by colleagues and students but had occasionally sparked controversy among conservative parents and community members who worried about the explicit content their children were exposed to. For Jason, Eva's dedication to promoting LGBTQ and sexual themes in literature wasn't something he entirely supported. He'd once expressed to her that he felt it was pushing the liberal agenda, especially in an elementary school setting, a stance that had led to disagreements between them. When detectives pressed Jason further, he admitted feeling uncomfortable with Eva's passion. It wasn't the first time he felt that they had fundamentally different values, but he'd brushed it off, focusing instead on their shared moments and the bond they'd built. Still, this difference in viewpoint stuck out to investigators as a possible motive, particularly in light of Eva's untold background. As they continued questioning, officers informed Jason of Eva's past as a man, including her gender transition. His reaction was intense. Jason's face paled, and he repeatedly claimed he had no idea that Eva was transgender. "If I had known, I would have divorced her," he stated, his voice a mixture of shock and anger. Detectives noted his reaction, watching closely as he continued. Jason insisted he felt deceived, explaining that trust was everything to him, especially given his military background, where honesty and integrity were held in high regard. This revelation left Jason feeling blindsided, claiming that he felt their entire marriage had been built on a lie. Detectives recorded Jason's statements with care, noting the emotion he displayed. His denial of knowing about Eva's gender identity, along with his conservative stance, began forming a possible motive in the minds of the investigators. They saw in Jason a man who felt betrayed, whose discomfort with his wife's LGBTQ advocacy might have deepened into something darker. His insistence on never knowing about Eva's transition left them with more questions than answers. But it was clear that his emotional state and conservative beliefs would play a key role in the investigation. The second suspect was Laura Martinez, 27, a close friend of Eva's and a social worker who dedicated her life to supporting transgender youth. Laura and Eva's connection went deeper than friendship. They'd once been sexually involved, a relationship marked by deep understanding and mutual respect. Though their sexual relationship ended, the two had remained close, with Laura one of the few people Eva trusted with the details of her transition and personal struggles. Laura was fiercely protective of Eva, but her feelings were complicated, especially once Eva married Jason. When police brought Laura in for questioning, she spoke openly about her complicated relationship with Eva, and as it turned out, her more recent entanglement with Jason. According to Laura, she'd become sexually involved with Jason several months after Eva and Jason were married. She described this affair with a casual frankness, telling detectives that she had been pushing the couple to consider an open marriage, a suggestion she said was in the best interest of everyone involved, and that my bleak gets everyone to bleak better. Detectives noted Laura's blunt and unapologetic demeanor as she continued. Laura explained that she believed an open marriage could ease the tension between Eva and Jason, particularly since she sensed Jason's discomfort with Eva's work and advocacy. In her own words, Laura thought that by opening up their marriage, Eva and Jason could expand their sexual horizons and create a less restrictive dynamic. Behind this suggestion, however, was Laura's own limitless libido. She wanted to restart a sexual relationship with Eva while also being intimate with Jason. Detectives began to suspect her intentions were not entirely altruistic. Laura revealed that her methods of persuasion included casual conversations with Eva, framing her proposal as progressive and beneficial, especially for a couple with differing personal views. With Jason, she was more direct, speaking to his frustration over Eva's dedication to LGBTQ issues, and portraying an open relationship as a solution to their growing disconnect. By planting these seeds, Laura hoped to normalize the idea, positioning herself as a neutral, caring friend when really all she wanted was more sex. Police pressed Laura on her intentions, asking if she had ever directly suggested this arrangement to Jason as a way to further her own interests. Laura denied any manipulative intent, insisting she only wanted to help the couple explore, quote, modern relationship possibilities. She admitted to feeling torn between her loyalty to Eva and her sexual attraction to Jason, but she painted herself as someone who had been caught between complex feelings. The detectives left the interview with a clearer picture of Laura's involvement and her potentially self-serving motives. They considered her encouragement of an open marriage combined with her secret affair with Jason as a source of underlying tension that could have impacted the couple's relationship and ultimately may have played a role in the events leading up to Eva's death. On March 20, 2014, 5 days after Eva's death, San Diego detectives made a discovery that would change the direction of their investigation. That morning, a detective reviewing Eva's medical records from the past few years uncovered a significant piece of information. This detective, Michael Doggy Torres-Oncaco, was combing through Eva's files in hopes of finding any medical clues that might shed light on the unexplained scars on her chest and lower abdomen that had initially puzzled investigators. Torres's discovery was critical. Eva had been assigned male at birth and had undergone gender-affirming surgeries years before meeting Jason, and Jason, who previously denied knowing, had actually found out. This information was the missing piece detectives needed to understand both Eva's past and her relationship with Jason. Realizing Eva had been transgender clarified the scars found on her body. Detective Torres-Oncaco shared this revelation with the lead investigator, who immediately recognized its implications. This discovery raised new questions about Jason's reaction to learning Eva's history, particularly whether he'd known about her identity before they married or had discovered it after the wedding. Detectives began to wonder if Jason's actions on the night of Eva's death could have been influenced by this revelation. Investigators re-evaluated Jason's previous statements, noting his insistence that he had never known Eva was transgender. He had even claimed that had he known, he wouldn't have married her. This revelation seemed to paint Jason's shock and potential anger at learning about Eva's identity in a new light. The police started to see a possible motive tied to a sense of betrayal, and Jason struggled to reconcile these feelings with his rigid, transphobic views on gender roles and identity. Detectives were also struck by the fact that Eva hadn't shared this crucial part of her life with her husband, something that now seemed to be a tragic decision made out of fear of rejection, fueled by society's latent transphobia. As police dug further into Eva's background and Jason's statements, they began forming a theory that Jason's reaction to Eva's identity was a driving factor in her death. The new information also brought Laura Martinez back into focus. Given Laura's close relationship with Eva and knowledge of her identity, detectives questioned whether Laura's actions may have influenced Jason's suspicions, or even led him to question Eva's past. The investigation now took on a new urgency, with detectives piecing together each relationship dynamic and trying to understand if this revelation had set the tragic events of that night in motion. This twist transformed the case from one that seemed like a domestic dispute into a far more complicated exploration of personal identity, secrecy, and betrayal. As detectives continued their search for answers, they turned their attention to Paul Reid, Jason's close friend and confidant. Paul, 34, was a longtime political organizer for the Republican Party and known among his colleagues as a dedicated campaigner with deeply conservative views. Like Jason, he often expressed disapproval of Eva's advocacy for LGBTQ issues, and he had even voiced concerns to Jason about Eva's influence on local youth through her work as a librarian pushing sexually explicit books. Yet, as police dug deeper into Paul's life, a startling truth emerged that contradicted his public image. Paul was secretly sexually involved with multiple men, hiding his sexual orientation from nearly everyone around him. The first hints of Paul's double life surfaced as detectives examined his financial records. Investigators discovered that Paul had accumulated significant debt to several male escorts in the San Diego area, with payments dating back over a year. The transactions were frequent and substantial, leading police to wonder if Paul's financial struggles had added tension to his already complex friendship with Jason. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that Paul's conservative image was a mask, hiding a hidden life he went to great lengths to conceal. In a later interrogation, Paul reluctantly confessed to police about an incident that revealed just how entangled he was in Jason's life. One night after a party, Paul admitted that he had drugged Jason, slipping something into his drink to ensure he'd fall asleep deeply. Once Jason was unconscious, Paul, who had been harboring feelings for Jason for years, went further by engaging in sexual acts with him while he slept, something Jason never knew about. Paul's admission shocked detectives, adding yet another layer of betrayal and hidden desires to an already tangled investigation. Detectives were now looking at Paul as a potential suspect not just for his financial secrets and hidden sexual orientation, but also for his strange secretive attachment to Jason and jealousy of Eva. They questioned whether Paul might have held a grudge against Eva, feeling she had taken a place in Jason's life he wished he could occupy. Some detectives speculated whether Paul's influence might have pushed Jason's feelings about Eva's identity into darker territory. Despite Paul's conservative rhetoric, his life choices were a striking contradiction to the values he publicly supported. Detectives began to consider whether this internal conflict and jealousy could have fueled his actions, either directly in Eva's death or in stoking Jason's resentment towards her. They theorized that Paul might have indirectly pushed Jason to confront Eva on the night she was killed, setting off a tragic sequence of events. With Paul's confession about drugging Jason and his substantial financial debts to male escorts, investigators grew more suspicious of his role in the case. Although he was not immediately arrested, police believed they were on the trail of a dark secret that could finally bring clarity to the tangled web surrounding Eva's murder. In the early hours of March 22, 2014, Jason Collins sat in his living room, replaying the details of the last few days over and over. His feelings toward Eva, his wife of just a few months, had drastically changed. Discovering she was a transgender woman had shaken him deeply. Jason's strict upbringing and military background had taught him to see things in black and white, and he now felt betrayed, confused, and trapped by Eva's secret. A sense of betrayal grew within him as he began to believe Eva had deceived him, hiding a fundamental part of herself. By the time he confronted her that night, his anger was at a boiling point. The confrontation began as a tense argument in their small San Diego apartment. As their voices rose, Jason's frustration turned into rage. The argument escalated, and in a fit of anger, he lashed out, grabbing Eva by the neck. Overwhelmed with a mix of betrayal and disbelief, he continued to press until Eva fell silent, leaving her lifeless on the floor. In those final moments, Jason felt his anger shift to an unsettling calm, a chilling sense of release as his wife lay before him. Realizing what he'd done, he attempted to stage the scene to look like a domestic dispute gone terribly wrong, disarraying the room to mimic signs of a struggle. In the days following the murder, Jason kept a low profile, attending his shifts at Camp Pendleton as usual, putting on a calm demeanor. But detectives were already piecing together evidence that pointed to him. Investigators noted that there were no signs of forced entry into the apartment, suggesting that Eva had known her attacker. Additionally, small inconsistencies in Jason's story began to emerge. He claimed he was asleep during the time of Eva's death, yet neighbors reported hearing raised voices from their apartment that night. When detectives questioned him more intensely, Jason grew visibly nervous, shifting his story slightly with each interrogation. It was Eva's autopsy that confirmed detectives' suspicions. The strangulation marks matched the profile of a strong assailant who would have needed close, personal access to the victim, fitting Jason's build and access to the apartment. On April 3, 2014, detectives arrested Jason at his apartment. As officers handcuffed him, he appeared shell-shocked, a mixture of disbelief and a strange calm crossing his face. In the moment of his arrest, he realized the full gravity of his actions, but he refused to make any statements, holding on to a stoic silence. The arrest came as a relief to Eva's friends, particularly to her close friend Laura Martinez, who felt a sense of justice in seeing Jason face consequences. Jason's calm reaction disturbed investigators, as they wondered if he had any remorse for his actions. The weight of his choices is betrayal, and his anger had led to the tragic end of a life, shattering both families in the process. Jason Collins' trial began in January 2016, over a year and a half after the brutal murder of Eva Collins, due to California's long wait time for trials. Jason's attorney, Miles Beck, 45, was an experienced defense lawyer known for his sharp strategies and ability to navigate tricky cases. Beck decided on a controversial approach, a transphobia defense, arguing that Jason's violent reaction was due to society's inherent bias against transgender people. Beck claimed that society's negative attitudes had played a role in Jason's inability to accept Eva's identity, suggesting that this latent transphobia was the underlying cause of Jason's actions that night. In his opening statements, Beck argued that Jason had acted out of a moment of intense confusion and betrayal. He painted a picture of Jason as a conservative man raised with traditional beliefs, describing how the discovery of Eva's identity had sent him into a spiral of inner conflict and rage. Beck even presented expert witnesses, including psychologists, who testified about how societal pressures and lack of understanding of gender identity could push someone to act irrationally when facing such a revelation. The defense's goal was clear: to deflect responsibility from Jason personally and frame the murderer as an unfortunate, though understandable, reaction to Eva's deception, as they labeled it. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Carla Sanchez, 38, strongly countered the defense's approach. Sanchez was known for her passionate pursuit of justice, and she argued that Jason's actions were premeditated and born out of deeply personal prejudices, not societal ones. She emphasized the planning that went into the crime scene staging and pointed out the inconsistencies in Jason's statements to police, casting doubt on his claims of a heat-of-the-moment reaction. This was not about society, she stated during her closing arguments. This was about Jason Collins' inability to accept the woman he married. Eva Collins died because of his choice, not society's influence. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning a guilty verdict for second-degree murder. Jason was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. As the sentence was read, Jason appeared expressionless, maintaining the same detached demeanor he'd shown throughout the trial. He later expressed in a brief statement to the court that he felt he had been misunderstood, reiterating his belief that societal factors had influenced his actions. For Eva's friends and family, the verdict brought a sense of justice, but the defense's reliance on transphobia as a factor left many uneasy. Laura Martinez, Ava's closest friend, expressed relief that Jason was held accountable but voiced frustration that Ava's life and identity had been used as a point of contention. The sentencing, in the end, marked the closing of a tragic chapter, though it left lingering questions about prejudice, acceptance, and accountability in cases involving gender identity. After Jason Collins's conviction and sentencing in January 2016, life for the key people involved in the case took unexpected turns. Jason was sent to a high-security prison in Colorado, where he would serve his 25-year sentence without the possibility of parole. Throughout his time in prison, he became a controversial figure, often making headlines for his public statements about his crime. He frequently blamed society for the murder, claiming that he was a victim of his upbringing, though few found his excuses convincing. Over the years, Jason's story faded from the media as his sentence continued, but the memories of Ava's tragic death and the sensational trial remained in the public consciousness. Meanwhile, Laura Martinez, who had been a close friend of Ava, used the publicity surrounding the case to launch a new career. Laura, a trained therapist, had long been interested in helping others with relationship issues, especially in navigating complex dynamics involving gender and identity. Following Ava's death, she began offering counseling services focused on sex therapy and LGBTQ+ issues. Her approach was open-minded and compassionate, which resonated with many clients seeking understanding in their personal lives. Laura often spoke about how Ava's death inspired her to advocate for a more inclusive, empathetic world, where people of all genders could feel comfortable being themselves. As for Paul Collins, Jason's younger brother, his life took a dramatic shift after the trial. In the wake of his brother's conviction, Paul found himself re-evaluating his own views, particularly when it came to his conservative beliefs. Although he had long followed in Jason's footsteps as a Republican, the events surrounding his brother's crime pushed Paul to rethink his stance on LGBTQ+ issues and gender identity. By the end of 2017, Paul publicly came out as gay and announced he was leaving the Republican Party, citing his growing discomfort with its stance on LGBTQ+ rights. He became an outspoken advocate for LGBTQ+ rights and soon joined the Democratic Party, aligning himself with candidates who supported equal rights and inclusivity. His transformation was widely covered by local news outlets, including the Denver Post, where Paul spoke openly about his journey toward self-acceptance. Though their fates were shaped by tragedy, all three, Jason, Laura, and Paul, sought to reshape their lives in different ways, turning painful experiences into moments of personal change.